To be or not to be? A logical question, asterisk, asterisk. We've talked before about formal logic and the foundations of reasoning. In those discussions, we emphasize that truth doesn't come from authority, it comes from evidence. No matter how confident you are, if you don't have empirical proof, your truth is just dressed up opinion. And even when we do have evidence, we only get inductive truth, the kind that's true so far, but could be disproved tomorrow. In this essay, we zoom in on how individual truths appear in the light of experience. Specifically, we explore how truth is tied to reference. That is, how our minds point to reality and say, yep, that's a thing. We'll even take on Descartes' famous line, I think, therefore I am, and unpack what kind of fact he thought he was stating. Along the way, we'll look at the curious case of to be and why translating it as existence can cause all kinds of confusion. By the end, we'll swing back to Descartes and reflect on how rationalism came to be and why it sometimes trips over its own feet. I'll keep things grounded and readable. Philosophy doesn't have to sound like you're applying for a wizard license. The law of identity and reference. The law of identity, the idea that a thing is what it is, only makes sense if we can compare things. We don't usually say an apple is an apple, unless we're being sarcastic or philosophical. But the ability to substitute one symbol for another underlies everything from basic arithmetic to semantic logic. When we say 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, we're assuming that two different things called 1 behave the same way when added. That assumption is baked into what's called the substitution axiom. If two things are functionally identical, we can treat them as the same. No math without it. Now switch gears. Let's talk language. Words like apple don't just point to one specific fruit. They point to a general idea. That's reference. The word is a symbol that stands for a mental image, which is itself abstracted from a pile of real-life apples we've seen. 2. Identity and synthetic judgment. Judgment, in logic, means taking symbols that refer to real or imagined things and comparing them to decide if they match. When Newton looked at how objects fall and how planets move, he noticed they both followed curves. He tested different mathematical models and found that one, where acceleration varies inversely with the square of the distance, fit both cases. That's a synthetic judgment, connecting two things that weren't obviously linked. Philosopher Immanuel Kant divided judgments into two categories. A priori, knowledge we get through reason alone, like 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. A posteriori, knowledge from experience, like fire is hot. Both play a role in how we say something is. 3 is as a judgment of exclusion. When you say, this is a cat, you're doing more than labeling. You're making a decision that the furry critter in front of you meets the criteria for catness. This relies on the law of the excluded middle. Something either is or isn't a cat. It can't be both. Yes, quantum cats are special, but even Schrödinger didn't mean it literally. Importantly, not a cat doesn't mean a dog. It could be a fish or a shoe. The point is, we decide what something is by deciding what category it belongs in, based on rules that are clear and consistent. 4. To be is about truth, not existence. When someone says, I am, what are they actually saying? Philosophically, it's not necessarily about mystical being. It's about truth, about saying, this statement matches reality. If I say, I am a teacher, and you say, I am tired, both statements are meant to reflect reality. The verb, to be, is doing the work of connecting subject to truth. The trouble starts when we treat to be as if it implies some deep metaphysical existence. In logical terms, it doesn't. It just signals that a judgment has been made, a claim about identity, location, or status. So I am is shorthand for my presence in this context is real enough to make this sentence true. Not a lot less dramatic, but a lot more useful. I think, therefore I am. René Descartes came up with this slogan in an era where truth came from pulpits and power. People believed what they were told, or else. Descartes decided to doubt everything. Can I trust my senses? Nope, they lie. Can I trust others? Hard pass. But wait, if I'm doubting, then I'm thinking. And if I'm thinking, then I must exist. Because non-existent things don't have thoughts, right? I think, therefore I am isn't magic. It's a logic hack. Descartes wanted to find one undoubtable truth to build the rest of knowledge on. This was his rock. The logic here is less formal than it seems. Descartes isn't running a syllogism. He's doing introspection with a heavy coat of math envy. But it worked. It gave birth to rationalism, the idea that reason is the best path to truth. Of course, rationalism eventually became dogmatic, just like the religious authority it replaced. That's how ideas go. They start as breakthroughs, harden into rules, and then get smashed by the next generation of thinkers. Still, I think, therefore I am, stands tall because it shows how even in the face of total doubt, we can find a way back to meaning, starting with our own thoughts. Final thoughts. Being isn't a mystical aura. It's a logical move. To be is a way of saying, based on the rules I'm using, this statement checks out. When Descartes said, I am, he wasn't tapping into divine presence. He was running a self-check. So next time you're having an existential crisis, just remember, you don't need to feel real to be real. You just need a good enough reason to say, yep, that's me. If this sparked something in you, or gave you a reason to pause and think, consider hitting that like button, subscribing, and joining me on this ongoing journey of rational curiosity. Let's commit to thinking better together.